What if I told you that everything you've ever believed about death, the peaceful passing, the ceremonial farewell, even the cremation itself, was designed not to liberate your soul but to bind it? You've been taught to see death as an end, a simple event, a single breath, and then silence. But what if that silence is an illusion? What if behind the curtain of what we call death, there exists a vibrant, critical window, ATT, a window that determines what happens to your consciousness after it leaves the body? From the moment you enter this world, you're conditioned to accept a certain version of reality. You're told that when you die, it's over. Your body is disposed of, either buried or burned, and that's it. Cremation, they say, is just a practical, even noble way to return to the elements. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. But here's what they never tell you, what ancient spiritual systems knew for thousands of years, and what modern culture has conveniently forgotten or ignored. Cremation is not just physical, it's energetic. And, depending on when and how it's done, it could interfere with the very essence of who you are. Death is not the end, it's not even a pause, it is a passage, Vayokriya, a doorway, and like all sacred doorways, it must be approached with reverence, precision, and timing. Your consciousness doesn't just vanish after your final breath, it lingers, it watches, it adjusts. In fact, what happens in the hours and days after death may be more important than most people realize. And yet, in today's world, we rush this process. We burn the body, often within hours. We rob the soul of its chance to recalibrate, to integrate, to ascend. Imagine this. You've spent your entire life in a physical vessel. Your body, as flawed as it may seem, is not just a shell. It is a sacred extension of your consciousness. Every cell stores memory. Every organ, emotion. Your skin, your bones, your breath, all of it holds energetic imprints from your experiences. And when you die, that energetic imprint doesn't immediately dissolve. The soul needs time to pull itself away from the field of the body. But when that body is cremated too soon, especially without spiritual preparation, you're not just burning flesh, you're disrupting the transition of the soul. You may be asking, but how can burning the body hurt the soul if the soul is already gone? That's the illusion. The soul does not fully depart the moment the heart stops beating. In the unseen realms, separation is not instantaneous. The bond between body and spirit, between form and frequency, requires gentle detachment. There is a subtle energetic tether that must be released, not severed. And fire, intense, uncontrolled fire, can rupture that tether. It can scatter the consciousness, fragment the energy, or worse, confuse the soul into believing it is still trapped within the trauma of the body. This is why in many ancient cultures, cremation was not performed immediately. There was a sacred waiting period, a time of stillness. A time to honor the in-between, what some traditions called the liminal space. This period was not symbolic, it was practical, it was spiritual, it was energetically essential. During this time, the soul is still aware, it can hear, it can feel, it can observe its surroundings, and if the body is suddenly engulfed in fire during this delicate phase, it may cause disorientation or even suffering on a vibrational level. They don't teach you this in school, they don't say it in the hospital, and they certainly don't whisper it at your average funeral home, because to do so would raise questions, dangerous questions. Questions that might reveal how deeply spiritual truths have been buried beneath layers of convenience, commerce, and modern disconnection. You see, cremation has become normalized not because it is sacred, but because it is simple, it's cheap, it's efficient, it leaves no trace. But what about your energy? What about your soul's journey? What about the space between death and rebirth? This isn't just about what happens to your body. It's about what happens to you. In many sacred traditions, the post-death phase is considered one of the most critical stages in the soul's evolution. It's believed that during this time, the soul is vulnerable, open to influence, direction, even confusion. It begins to shed the energetic layers of physical identity. It reviews its life. It searches for guidance. It seeks peace. But if the body is destroyed too soon, that process is violently interrupted. the soul may become restless, tethered, or stuck in a state of confusion. And if it doesn't transition cleanly, it may carry that distortion into its next incarnation. There are stories, thousands of them, of wandering spirits, of hauntings, of strange disturbances following premature cremations. These are not coincidences, these are energetic echoes. Fractured transitions, souls caught in between, trying to understand what happened, searching for closure they were never given. And the saddest part? Most of them had no idea this could happen. They trusted the system, they trusted their loved ones, and they left their bodies expecting to be honored, not incinerated without intention. None of this is said to invoke fear. This is not about judgment, it's about awareness. It's about reclaiming the sacred truth that death is not a procedural checkbox, minus dire, it's a spiritual initiation. It requires presence, it demands time, it thrives in silence, not smoke. So if you've been led to believe that cremation is simply what we do now, it's time to question that belief. Because behind the normalization lies a void, a spiritual void, where ancient wisdom has been stripped away in favor of modern convenience. But convenience is not the same as consciousness. And when it comes to something as profound as the transition of the soul, consciousness is everything. This is your wake-up call, not to reject cremation blindly, but to understand what it truly is, to see it for more than fire and ash. To realize that when you choose how your body is treated after death, you are making a decision that echoes far beyond the grave. You are choosing the frequency of your final moments in this life, and the first moments in whatever comes next. And if you're reading this, it's not an accident. Deep inside, something in you already knows. You've felt the unease. You've heard the silent call. You've sensed that death holds more than what you've been told. And now you know why. Because the truth has always been hidden in plain sight. And now, it's asking you to remember. What if I told you that the oldest, most sacred cultures on Earth knew something about death that we've completely forgotten, or worse, deliberately erased? For thousands of years, ancient civilizations treated death not as an end, but as a spiritual crossing, emmenia, a sacred rite of passage that demanded reverence, precision, and divine timing. In their eyes, the way a soul exited the body directly affected where it went next, and central to their understanding was one powerful element: fire. But here's what they never told you. Fire wasn't always used to liberate the soul. In fact, in many of these ancient traditions, fire was feared in the context of death. It was respected, yes, even revered as a symbol of purification and transformation. But it was also seen as volatile, destructive, and too powerful to be used carelessly at the moment a soul is most vulnerable. When applied without deep spiritual preparation, fire could sever energetic ties before they were ready to be released, and that meant the soul could become stuck. Go back to the earliest temples of Egypt, and you'll find something curious. The pharaohs, the sages, the priests, they weren't burned, they were entombed. Layered in intricate rituals that lasted not hours, but days, sometimes weeks. Why? Because the Egyptians believed in the Ka, the vital life force that lingered after death. The Ba, the soul essence that could travel beyond the body. And the Ah, the immortal spirit that had to be consciously awakened. For all of this to occur, the body had to remain intact, undisturbed, and sealed in an energetically sound chamber. Fire, in this context, was used symbolically, a flame representing light, offering ascension, but never to consume the physical form, because they knew destroying the body too quickly could disturb the soul's migration. Now journey east to the Himalayas, where Tibetan mystics have mapped the soul's transition in meticulous detail. Their sacred text, known in English as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, doesn't just hint at life after death, 1920, it provides an actual roadmap. According to their teachings, after death, the soul enters the bardo, HT, an intermediate realm that unfolds in stages. Here, consciousness is hyper-aware, hypersensitive, and still deeply connected to the physical body it just left. Tibetan masters warn that premature cremation can shock the soul, disrupting its orientation in this fragile phase. The burning of the body, before the soul has fully detached, is not just painful energetically, it's disorienting, like being violently pulled from one dimension into another before you're ready. This isn't metaphor. To them, it's literal. And yet, modern culture rushes this moment. Within hours of death, bodies are incinerated, not with reverence, but for convenience. No time for sacred silence, no space for spiritual unfolding. The fire that was once held as holy has become industrialized, mechanized, stripped of ceremony and weaponized against the soul's natural departure. And we wonder why so many feel stuck after death. Why hauntings happen. Why certain energies linger for years in the places someone died. Maybe it's not superstition. Maybe it's a symptom of spiritual dismemberment. In Hindu traditions, cremation does exist, but not in the way you think. It's not rushed. It's not random. In fact, the cremation rites in ancient Vedic texts are governed by a specific sequence of rituals known as antiesti, the last sacrifice. The fire is prepared with prayers. The timing is aligned with astrological placements. The body is often kept in the home for up to 24 hours, allowing the soul to begin detaching slowly. And when fire is finally used, it's not viewed as disposal, not fire, it's transformation through invocation. The Agni, the sacred flame, becomes a divine messenger. Without the rituals, without the mantras, without the timing, the fire is considered dangerous, even harmful to the soul. So while cremation is present, it's never casual, it's never immediate, it's never treated as a quick fix for grief. And that's the missing link, the rituals, the reverence, the knowing. Somewhere along the way, our culture lost its memory. We adopted the appearance of ancient practices but stripped them of their soul. We turned sacred fire into factory flame. We stopped seeing death as a transition and began treating it as garbage disposal. And in doing so, we may have started interfering with one of the most sacred processes the soul ever experiences. You might be wondering, why does this matter now? Because the ancient world didn't lose this knowledge. It was buried, suppressed, dismissed by materialist science and commercialized by the modern death industry. What once took place in temples now happens in crematoriums. What was once led by high priests is now managed by morticians trained in procedure but not in spirit. And while bodies disappear in plumes of sterile white smoke, what happens to the soul? That's the question they don't want you asking. Because if you knew what the ancients knew, you'd see that this moment, the moment right after death, might be more important than anything that came before it. You'd know that the soul hovers, observes, listens, that it waits, that it still feels, and that rushing to destroy its last anchor to this world could send it into confusion, fear, or fragmentation. This isn't mythology, it's spiritual physics, and the oldest civilizations understood it long before we had microscopes or machines. So ask yourself, why were the sages of Tibet, Egypt, and India all so cautious with the body after death? Why were they so obsessed with timing, with preparation, with ritual space? And why is our modern world so quick to erase those teachings? Could it be that cremation, when done without awareness, isn't just a mistake, but a spiritual trap? The fire isn't the enemy, but it must be approached like lightning, powerful, sacred, transformative, and dangerous when mishandled. In the hands of a master, fire becomes ascension. In the hands of the unaware, it becomes a shortcut to soul entanglement. The ancients knew this. They passed it down in scrolls, in chants, in secret rites behind temple doors. And now, it's our responsibility to remember. Because the truth is, death is not the end, it's a passage. And whether that passage opens into liberation or confusion depends on what you do in the moments just after life ends. And what you do with fire. What if the moment you die isn't the end, but the beginning of something far more intricate and breathtaking than anything you've ever imagined? You've likely been told that when the heart stops beating and the breath ceases, the story concludes. But the truth is, that's just where the next chapter begins. Not for your body, but for your consciousness. Because right after physical death, something extraordinary happens. You don't just disappear, you awaken. In the minutes after death, you're still there, fully present, fully aware. The separation between body and soul doesn't happen all at once like flipping a switch. It unfolds gently, sometimes subtly, sometimes shockingly. You might feel yourself floating, or observing the room from a new angle. The people around you may be crying, but you're no longer bound to their world the way you once were, and yet, you're still tethered. The body you left behind still holds a frequency, a memory, an energetic blueprint of you. That's the paradox. You're gone, but not gone. This early phase after death is one of the most critical stages of your entire spiritual journey, and yet, almost no one talks about it. Most people are in too much shock, too much grief, too focused on logistics and rituals to even consider what you might be experiencing. But in those first moments, your soul begins its process of release, of reconciling, of remembering. You may replay your life, not as a punishment, not as a judgment, but as a kind of divine review. Every choice, every act of kindness, every moment of neglect, it all arises in full emotional clarity, not because someone is judging you, but because you're seeing it through the eyes of your higher self. And in this state, you feel the impact of your actions from the inside out. You feel how your words affected others, how your silence shaped events, how your presence changed lives. It's not dramatic, it's deeply personal, intimate, sacred. And while this is happening, something else unfolds: the energetic detachment from the body. You see, the body is not just flesh, it's a vessel, a container, a field of energetic imprints. Even after death, it holds traces of you, memories, emotions, frequencies. And the soul, before fully ascending or transitioning, needs to separate from those frequencies, not violently, not instantly, but through a gentle unweaving. This process doesn't happen in seconds. It takes time that most modern systems simply do not respect. In the rush to deal with the physical remains, this sacred window is often cut short. But in ancient traditions, this window was honored, protected. Some believed it lasted 72 hours. Others said 3 days of stillness were required. Why? Because during this time, the soul is vulnerable, sensitive, open to influence, not in fear, but in heightened awareness, like waking from a long dream and trying to remember who you really are. If you're burned or buried too quickly, your energy field doesn't have time to decompress. Imagine suddenly being ripped from a warm bath into freezing air. That shock? That disruption? That's what happens energetically when the body is interfered with too soon. And in that confusion, the soul may struggle to orient itself, to understand what happened, to begin its upward spiral. This is why timing matters, why sacred stillness is so important. The hours after death aren't just about letting go, they're about remembering. You start to remember what you are beyond the physical. You begin to recognize your own light, your own expansiveness. You're no longer confined by the brain, or the senses, or the ego's defenses. You become aware of the larger field. The soul's memory begins to reawaken, memories not just from this life, but from lives before. You start to understand your patterns, your purpose, the karmic loops you've been spinning in for lifetimes, and then comes a choice, a moment, a threshold. Some spiritual systems describe this as the point of the clear light, a flash of truth so bright, so raw, that if you recognize it, you merge with it, you become it. You dissolve into unity with Source, ending the cycle of birth and rebirth. But if you're not ready, if fear clouds your vision, if attachments cling too tightly, you miss that light, and the journey continues. In the days following death, your consciousness begins to move through layers. Some experience this as a dreamlike state, filled with visions, symbols, and entities. Some of these are manifestations of your own subconscious. Others are real energetic forms, guides, or even fragments of unresolved experience. You meet what you carry. Your desires, your fears, your attachments, they all take shape and stand before you, not to haunt you, but to reflect you, to give you one more chance to evolve. This stage is not punishment, it's purification, a deep sorting of what is real and what is illusion, a peeling back of layers until only the essence remains. You can face these visions with courage and clarity, or you can run. But whatever you do, you learn. Every soul learns. That's the purpose of this phase, to integrate and release, so that the next chapter can begin clean. And yet, this entire process hinges on something most people never even think about: what happens immediately after they die. That window, that narrow but sacred space of hours and days, sets the tone for everything that follows. If it is honored, the soul transitions smoothly, peacefully. If it is rushed, if it is ignored, or worse, desecrated by violent rituals like rushed cremation, the consequences echo far beyond this lifetime. No one talks about this. Not your doctor, not your priest, not your funeral director. But your soul knows. You've always known. It's why you fear sudden death. It's why you instinctively recoil at the thought of your body being handled too soon. It's not superstition, it's memory, ancient memory, soul memory. There is a reason ancient cultures lit candles and kept vigil for days. There is a reason why monks meditate beside the body for hours after death. They are not mourning, they are protecting the energetic field. They are guiding the soul, they are creating a bridge between the worlds, and that bridge cannot be rushed. So now you understand. Death is not an event, it's a journey, a passage, and the soul's path immediately after leaving the body is delicate, profound, and sacred. How we treat the body during this time is not a logistical matter, it's a spiritual responsibility, because what really happens after you die is not a fade into blackness, it is a return, a revelation, and whether that return is peaceful or chaotic depends entirely on how we honor the first few moments after the last breath is taken. This is your chance to remember what the world has forgotten, to reclaim what your soul already knows. Death is not the end, it's the doorway back to the truth. You've been told that once the breath leaves the body is just flesh, that it no longer matters, that it's just a husk to be disposed of quickly and efficiently. But what if that idea is completely wrong? What if the body, even in death, still holds a powerful charge, one that plays a direct role in your soul's ability to move on? What if the very cells of your physical form remain spiritually active, broadcasting frequencies, memories, and energy long after your final heartbeat? This isn't fantasy, it's a forgotten spiritual truth. Flann John made from the tenor that your body is not just a biological machine. It is, and always has been, a vessel of sacred information, a spiritual antenna. And that antenna doesn't stop working just because the soul has stepped outside. The moment of death is not a hard shut-off switch. It's a soft, gradual transition. Think of it like mist lifting from a lake. Slow, delicate, layered. The body and soul remain tethered, however lightly, in the hours, even days, after death, which means how you treat the body matters, deeply. Inside every cell of your being is memory, not just of this life, but of many. Stored impressions, karmic imprints, emotional echoes. These aren't just psychological, they're energetic. The body is the final container of all your experiences. When you cry, when you love, when you suffer, when you awaken, all of it leaves a trace. Every spiritual lesson you've integrated is locked into your energetic field, and that field extends into the physical structure you inhabit. It's not just the soul that carries your evolution, the body does too. That's why ancient spiritual systems took such care in how they treated the body after death. They weren't obsessed with preservation out of vanity. They were safeguarding the vessel during a sacred release process. They understood that the physical form, even without consciousness inside, still held the echoes of your journey. And those echoes needed time to resolve, because when the soul detaches, it doesn't just float away clean. It pulls away from thousands of threads, emotional, spiritual, and energetic, all of which are woven into the tissues, bones, and blood it once occupied. If you sever those threads too quickly, if you incinerate the body before the unraveling completes, you risk leaving energetic fragments behind. Pieces of memory, pieces of self. And these fragments don't just vanish, they linger, they anchor, They can even become trapped in the environment, in the places or people the deceased loved most. That's why sometimes, after a rushed or traumatic passing, people say they can still feel someone in the room. That's why certain places carry an inexplicable heaviness. The energy didn't finish processing, it was interrupted. Spiritual masters have long spoken of etheric residue, minus the subtle energetic imprint that remains in the body and around it after death. This residue is not just symbolic, it's magnetic. And depending on how the body is treated, this magnetism can either gently dissolve or grow chaotic. The body acts like a grounding wire. As long as it's respected, it helps the soul fully discharge the karma, pain, and attachments of this life. It allows for the closing of the energetic circuit. But destroy the body too quickly, and you break that circuit mid-transfer. You halt the transmission, and that incomplete process can affect everything that comes next. Even karma, I'm 84, that deeply misunderstood force of spiritual cause and effect, is entwined in this. Because karma isn't just a cosmic scorecard, it's energy, it's motion, and a great deal of it is stored in your body. The trauma you didn't process, the emotions you suppressed, the truths you avoided, all of it finds a home in the tissues you carry. When you die, the soul begins the process of releasing these imprints. It reviews, it reflects, and then, ideally, it moves on. But if the body is rushed into fire, if the karmic residues are still discharging, you risk creating a kind of loop, like a song that never finishes, a lesson that never completes. This is why some traditions insist on leaving the body undisturbed for a set period of time, sometimes 3 days, sometimes longer. It's not superstition, it's a spiritual safeguard. They knew that the body doesn't just decay, it transitions, and during that time, the energetic layers dissolve at their own pace. The physical body, the emotional body, the mental body, and the spiritual body each disengage in stages. Cremating too soon is like ripping out a plug mid-upload. Something gets lost in the rush. And here's the piece no one talks about. When the body is destroyed violently, the soul can sometimes feel it. Yes, even after death, especially in the early phases, when the soul is still hovering, still observing, still partially connected. The burning of flesh, the cracking of bones, the sudden severing, these can create waves of confusion, panic, even pain. Not because the soul feels physical fire, but because it feels the shockwave of its own destruction. Imagine watching your own house burn down before you've moved all your belongings out. That's the level of disruption we're talking about. But there's a deeper layer still. The body isn't just a container for your own soul, it's a mirror of your lineage. Your ancestors live in your blood. Their stories, their wounds, their wisdom, all echo in your DNA. So when you transition out of your body, you're not just completing your own journey, you're closing loops that stretch back generations. And the way your body is handled can either honor that legacy or fracture it. This is why the body still matters. It is sacred, not because it's pretty or strong or young, but because it holds the blueprint of your soul's incarnation. It is the final altar, and how you treat that altar determines whether the transition is smooth or tangled, peaceful or chaotic, liberating or confusing. The modern world doesn't understand this. It sees the body as garbage once the spirit is gone, something to be hidden, sanitized, burned, and forgotten. But the ancients knew better. They saw the body as the bridge, the final grounding wire that allowed the soul to safely rise, and they treated it as such, with stillness, with chants, with sacred space, with time. This isn't about fear, it's about reverence. It's about understanding that the journey doesn't end at death, it deepens. And the body, even after death, still plays a role, still holds keys, still carries vibrations that must be acknowledged, not erased. So, if you've ever wondered why some spirits linger, why some places feel haunted, why some people carry grief for years after a loss, maybe it's not just emotion. Maybe it's energetic unfinished business. Maybe something in the way we handle death is interfering with the soul's release. And maybe, just maybe, It starts with how we treat the body that once held so much light. Because the body isn't just what you lived in, it's what you leave through. You've probably been told that cremation is just another way to handle the body after death, a clean, fast, modern alternative to burial. But what no one tells you is this: when done too soon, cremation can interrupt something sacred, something invisible to the eye but deeply felt by the soul. You might not see the ripple, but it echoes. And once you understand how energy works after death, you'll never look at fire the same way again. Fire isn't neutral. It's one of the most powerful forces in the universe. It purifies, yes, but it also destroys. It transforms matter instantly, reducing a body, a lifetime's worth of memory, energy, and vibration, to ash in a matter of minutes. But when you burn something that still holds energetic imprints, something that is still connected to the soul through subtle threads, you don't just transform it physically, you disrupt it spiritually. What most people don't realize is that even after death, your body remains energetically alive, not in the way we define life, but as a vessel still humming with vibration. There is still warmth. There is still energy flowing in the field. And most importantly, the soul is still in a process of detachment. It hasn't left completely. It's watching. It's feeling. It's integrating. And that process is delicate. Cremation, especially when done hastily, shatters that process like glass. Think about it. When you were born, it took time to acclimate to this world. You needed to adjust, to settle into your body, to learn how to navigate the density of form. Death is no different. It's a reversal of that process. The soul needs time to pull away, to dissolve its connection, to elevate beyond the lower vibrations of matter. And when fire is introduced too soon, it acts like a spiritual explosion. It rips the field, it rushes the exit, it cuts the tether before the soul is ready to let go. The result? Confusion, interruption, in some cases, fragmentation. The soul may scatter instead of ascend. It may stay tethered to the earth plane, unable to release completely. That's how hauntings happen. That's how restless energy lingers in spaces. The soul didn't move on because it wasn't given the time or space to do so with peace. And if no one knows this, if no one teaches this, the cycle repeats. Over and over again, we're burning bodies that haven't finished their process, and wondering why something still feels wrong. In many ancient traditions, fire was treated with reverence. It was not used casually, it was sacred, and when it was used in cremation, it followed strict timing. It was never rushed. The body was often left untouched for several days. In some cultures, they waited 3 full days before doing anything, because they understood the timeline of the soul. They knew that in those hours, something profound was still unfolding, something that could not be seen, but had to be honored. These warnings aren't myths. They're teachings passed down for thousands of years. Warnings not based on superstition, but on direct spiritual experience. Seers, mystics, and healers across cultures reported the same thing. Cremating the body too soon can trap the soul in a liminal state, a state where it feels neither here nor there, disconnected from the living, but not yet received by the higher realm. The fire doesn't just burn the body, it burns the bridge. And when the bridge is burned too soon, the soul can lose its way. You might wonder why no one talks about this, why it's not common knowledge. The answer is simple. It's inconvenient. In a world obsessed with efficiency, with streamlining every process, death has become industrialized. Cremation is faster, it's cheaper, it eliminates the mess, but at what cost? Convenience has replaced consciousness, and the soul, your soul, is paying the price. The real danger is that it's being normalized. People are planning their cremations without knowing what it really does. Families are rushing to carry out the process within hours of death. There's no silence, no reverence, no space for the soul to breathe. And because our culture has forgotten what death actually is, it's forgotten how to guide the soul through it. But here's the truth that changes everything. The soul is still listening, still observing. And when it sees its body, the vessel it inhabited for an entire lifetime, being burned without ceremony, without intention, without time, It can feel betrayed, confused, disconnected. And that energetic disruption doesn't just disappear, it carries over, into the next phase, into the next life, into the energetic records that shape your future experience. This doesn't mean fire is evil, it's not. Fire can be sacred. In the right time, in the right hands, it can liberate. But fire without awareness is violent. It cuts before the soul is ready to release. And that's the danger. Not the element itself, but how, and when, we use it. If you're beginning to feel uneasy, that's your inner knowing speaking. You've felt this before, maybe when you attended a cremation, and something didn't sit right. Maybe when you sensed a presence that lingered long after someone had died. That wasn't your imagination. That was truth, peeking through the veil. So what do you do with this knowledge? You remember. You reclaim what's been lost. You understand that your body, even in death, deserves time. It deserves peace. And your soul, the infinite part of you, deserves a clean exit, ATN, not a rushed one, because you are not just flesh, you are not disposable, you are a divine being in transition, and that transition is sacred. No one else may tell you this, but your soul already knows. Deep down, you feel the truth. The body is not just a shell to be burned, it's a bridge, a sacred corridor. And when treated with reverence, it can become a launchpad for the soul's next journey. But if burned too soon, it becomes an anchor, and that's not something anyone should risk. Because once the fire starts, there's no turning back. The choice you make, or allow others to make for you, echoes beyond this life. And the question you have to ask yourself is this: do you want your departure to be sacred or severed? You don't need fear to guide you. Let wisdom guide you. Let truth guide you. And let the fire, if it must be used with timing, intention, and deep spiritual care. Your transition deserves nothing less. There's a sacred number that echoes silently across almost every spiritual tradition. It's not always explained in textbooks, and you won't hear most scientists talk about it. But if you look closely at the rituals, the ceremonies, and the ancient death practices of cultures across the globe, you'll start to notice something strange. Time and time again, the number 3 appears. Not in mysticism alone, but in how long the dead are left undisturbed. 3 days, 72 hours, the soul's final grace period. Why 3 days? What makes that window so critical, so universal, that it transcends geography, language, and belief systems? From the pyramids of Egypt to the peaks of Tibet, from indigenous rites to early Christian customs, the body was often left alone, touched, for at least 72 hours. This wasn't superstition. It was spiritual science, a knowing passed down by seers, sages, and priests who understood that the soul doesn't instantly vanish the moment the heart stops beating. In fact, in many teachings, those first 72 hours are the most important in the entire death process, because that's when the soul hovers. You might have heard the stories, people who clinically died and came back, describing how they floated above their body, how they saw loved ones gather, how they observed everything, the hospital, the conversations, even their own last breath. These aren't hallucinations. They're glimpses into a deeper reality, one where the soul detaches not in a flash, but in stages. And during that delicate period, the energetic thread between soul and body is still active. In many traditions, this thread is referred to as the silver cord, an ethereal link that holds the soul close while it adjusts to its new state. This cord doesn't sever instantly, it weakens gradually. And for roughly 72 hours, it remains soft, elastic, and partially intact. That's why the soul can still feel, still see, still sense. It's not trapped, it's transitioning. Like a diver surfacing from deep waters, it needs time to adjust to the light. And that's why rushing the process is dangerous. In today's world, death has become a checklist, a procedure. Someone passes, and within hours, the paperwork is filed. The calls are made, the cremation scheduled, the fire lit. But what no one realizes is that by doing this, we may be pulling the soul out of its transition too soon. We may be forcing it through a door it isn't ready to walk through, and the consequences of that can be subtle or severe. The soul, if not given time to process, can become confused, disoriented. Imagine waking from a deep sleep only to find your house in flames, your body gone, your home destroyed. That's what rushed cremation feels like to a soul still connected to its body. That's not liberation, it's fragmentation, and it can leave pieces of the soul behind, pieces that take root in the place of death, pieces that cling to the people who loved them most. This isn't just theory, it's embedded in every culture that took death seriously. The Tibetans teach that after death, the soul passes through the bardo, a series of realms where it confronts visions, memories, and choices. The first 72 hours are considered the most spiritually volatile. It's during this time that monks read specific chants aloud to guide the soul gently through its terrain. They don't cremate immediately, they wait. They give the soul space to navigate. In traditional Jewish customs, burial is often swift, but before the body is ever touched, it's watched over by a sacred guardian. This vigil, known as shmira, ensures that the soul isn't left alone or startled. The body is never left exposed, never desecrated. There's an invisible awareness, the soul is still near. In Hindu traditions, even when cremation is practiced, it's not done instantly. The body is bathed, anointed, clothed. Prayers are whispered. Family members sit with the body, sharing breath and space, acknowledging the transition. Fire is never rushed. It is summoned, invoked, timed with astrological and spiritual precision, and the body is never burned until the soul has begun to withdraw. Even Christianity, in its earliest form, carried this knowing. The resurrection story itself is based on a 3-day passage. Christ, crucified, was entombed and did not rise for 72 hours. Was this symbolic? Perhaps. But what if it was also energetic? What if the soul's transformation, even for the most elevated beings, still honored that 3-day rule? It's not just symbolic mythology, it's a recurring pattern, hidden in plain sight. 72 hours. That's how long it takes for the soul to fully loosen its grip on the body, to complete its life review, to say its goodbyes, to recognize its death not as a tragedy, but as a door. If allowed this sacred window, the soul often departs in peace. Its energy begins to rise, the connection to the body fades, the light calls it forward, and the transition is smooth. But when that cycle is cut short, when the body is destroyed before the soul is ready, we interfere with the most sensitive chapter of spiritual evolution. The soul may panic, it may cling, it may try to stay near the people it loved, unsure of what's happened. This can lead to hauntings, energetic residue, even spiritual entanglements that echo for generations. And we wonder why so many souls feel stuck. We call it ghost stories, we call it superstition. But maybe it's just a result of ignoring the oldest wisdom we've ever known. Your body, after death, is not just meat, it's an energy field still pulsing with information. Your soul is not gone, it's watching, listening, feeling, and if given time, just 3 days, it begins to rise on its own. Like smoke from sacred incense, it ascends when it's ready. But burn the incense too soon, and the fragrance is lost. This is not about fear, it's about awareness, about recognizing that the spiritual world has rules, rhythms, and laws just as real as gravity. We've just forgotten them, and in our forgetting, we've rushed the dead. We've made death efficient, sanitary, quick. But in doing so, we may have stripped away the very thing that makes death sacred, the time it takes to become free. The 3-day rule isn't a superstition, it's a mercy. And it's a reminder that even in death, the soul moves in rhythm. That rhythm deserves to be honored, because when it is, death becomes not an interruption, but a return, a gentle homecoming, a peaceful ascent. Let the body rest, let the soul find its way, and in doing so, you restore a truth humanity once held sacred, that time is not the enemy, time is the temple. While the modern world rushes death, 19 signs a few papers, schedules a cremation, and moves on, the great spiritual traditions of this planet have always known better. For thousands of years, monks, mystics, and masters have treated death not as a logistical problem to be handled, but as a sacred rite to be honored. And if you were to see what they do instead, how they pause, how they prepare, how they hold space for the soul, you'd understand just how much has been lost in the name of efficiency. Among Tibetan monks, death is not the end of anything, it is a doorway, and you don't kick open a sacred doorway. You wait, you prepare, you observe the signs. When a person dies in these spiritual traditions, the body is not moved, it's not touched unless necessary. It's left in peace, in silence, with candles lit and prayers whispered, because they know something the rest of the world has forgotten. The soul is still listening, the consciousness is still present, and the energetic threads connecting it to the physical body are still dissolving. In the Tibetan tradition, death is seen as a process that continues well after the body has ceased to function. For at least 3 days, the body is left undisturbed, often positioned in meditation posture or wrapped in ceremonial cloth. Chanting begins immediately, not as a performance for the living, but as guidance for the soul. These chants are directional signals, spiritual GPS codes, reminding the soul where to go, what to look for, and what to avoid. Every syllable is intentional, every pause between words holds meaning, because they know that during this time, the soul is passing through energetic gates, and those gates respond to vibration. They don't rush cremation, they don't burn the body hours after death, they wait, they study the energetic signs. They look for physical cues, the cooling of the limbs, the softening of the jaw, the stillness in the heart field. Only when the soul's presence has fully withdrawn, only when the energetic body has released its grip on the physical, is cremation considered, and even then, it is approached with reverence, not routine. The fire is not a disposal system, it is a sacred flame. It is lit with mantras, surrounded by intention, and infused with awareness. Nothing is done blindly, nothing is done for convenience. In India, among Hindu sages and yogic practitioners, similar practices unfold. While cremation is common, it is not rushed. The body is bathed, anointed with oils, covered in flowers and sacred ash. The eyes are closed, not just physically, but symbolically, to assist the soul in turning inward. Family members chant sacred verses, inviting peace, clarity, and release. They don't just say goodbye, they create a corridor of light for the soul to pass through. There is a reason many of these cultures delay the cremation for up to 72 hours. That number isn't arbitrary. It's spiritual science. Within those 72 hours, the pranic field, mesia, the life force energy, is still unwinding. The chakras are still releasing. The soul is reviewing its life, navigating visions, preparing for the next phase of its journey. To interrupt that with fire before the process is complete isn't just disrespectful, it's disruptive on a cosmic level. And yet, it's not about rejecting cremation completely. It's about understanding the timing, the rituals, the purpose. Fire is a transformer. When used with awareness, it can help dissolve the last ties between the soul and the body. It can assist in liberation, but when used prematurely, without spiritual preparation, it becomes destructive. These masters don't fear fire, they respect it, they guide it, they wield it as a sacred tool, not a shortcut. Among indigenous shamans across the Americas, Africa, and the Pacific, death is treated as a community event, not a private tragedy. The body is often kept in the home for several days, not out of neglect, but out of reverence. The family sings, speaks, drums, and sits in vigil. They tell stories of the person's life, not for nostalgia, but to remind the soul of its identity, to anchor it before release. In some tribes, specific soul songs are sung, believed to call in ancestors who assist in guiding the spirit through the transition. The body is anointed with herbs, wrapped in sacred cloth, and sometimes buried under specific lunar cycles. Every action is infused with meaning. Every ritual is a bridge between the worlds. And perhaps most importantly, none of these traditions treat the body as trash. It is not burned hastily or buried in haste. It is honored. It is seen as the final sacred gift of this incarnation. Because they know that how you leave this world shapes how you enter the next. Your exit sets the tone, and cremation, when done with awareness, can be a beautiful act of release. But done without understanding, it becomes a spiritual detour. The reason modern cremation feels so hollow is because the soul has been forgotten in the process. The moment someone dies, the focus shifts entirely to the logistics. Call the authorities, sign the papers, book the crematorium, but where is the space to feel the soul's presence? Where is the silence to receive its message? Where is the time to honor the miracle of the life that just left the room? The monks know, the mystics know, the shamans know. That's why they wait, that's why they chant, that's why they listen for signs you can't hear with your ears but can only feel in your bones. The death process is not just a goodbye, it's a transmission. If you rush it, you miss it. If you ignore it, you block it. But if you honor it, something miraculous happens. The soul leaves in peace, the energy clears, the family feels closure that words could never provide, and the soul continues on its journey with clarity, not confusion. This is the great forgetting in the modern world. We've lost our death wisdom. We've traded ancient rites for corporate convenience. We've replaced spiritual presence with fluorescent lights and metal trays. But you can reclaim it. You can remember what was once sacred. You can choose to slow down, to light candles, to chant, to speak to the soul like it's still in the room, because it is. What monks, mystics, and masters do is not superstition, it's soul science. It's grounded in experience, in energetic truth, in lifetimes of observing the soul's journey from this world to the next. They don't need to guess what happens after death. They've seen it, they've guided it, they've practiced it, and now, so can you. Because awareness changes everything. When you understand the timing, the energy, the purpose behind each ritual, cremation transforms from an act of destruction into a ceremony of liberation. But it all begins with one choice: to treat death not as an inconvenience, but as a sacred rite of passage. The rest will follow. Fire has always been seen as a force of mystery. It flickers between the physical and the ethereal, untouchable yet tangible, dangerous yet mesmerizing. In every ancient tradition, fire held a dual role. It could bless or destroy. It could purify or consume. But one thing was always clear: fire was never neutral. It was sacred, alive, conscious. And when it came to death, it was approached with extreme caution. The fire element in spiritual alchemy represents transformation, not just change, transformation. A complete shift from one state to another, from matter into spirit, from illusion into truth. Alchemists knew this. They worked with fire not to destroy, but to elevate. To transmute base metals into gold, yes, but more importantly, to transmute the base self into a divine being. In this sense, fire was the portal through which one could pass from ignorance to enlightenment, but only if it was used correctly, and therein lies the danger. Because fire doesn't discriminate, it will destroy as easily as it purifies. If you light a sacred flame without awareness, without intention, without spiritual preparation, it doesn't become a portal. It becomes a weapon. It tears instead of transforms, and in the context of death, that difference is everything. In the ancient Vedic traditions, fire was considered a messenger to the gods, the living entity known as Agni. But Agni wasn't summoned lightly. There were rituals, mantras, offerings. The fire had to be invoked with reverence, its energy aligned with the intention of spiritual ascent. Without this, the fire wouldn't carry the soul upward, it would scatter it, like ash in the wind. That's why, in the most sacred cremation rites, the body was never burned immediately. It was prepared, bathed, anointed, blessed, and the fire was kindled with prayers that opened energetic pathways for the soul to follow. But today, fire is treated like a tool, mechanical, efficient, clean. We burn bodies with no ritual, no spiritual guidance, no understanding of what's really happening beyond the physical. And we expect the soul to simply know where to go. We assume that fire equals release, but that's a misunderstanding. Fire doesn't automatically liberate. It only liberates when the soul is ready and the fire is spiritually attuned. Otherwise, it doesn't act as a chariot, it acts as a trapdoor. Imagine being in a deep, meditative state. hovering just outside your body, adjusting to the afterlife, mykorete, and suddenly your form is engulfed in flames. Not ceremonially, not sacredly, just burned. Efficiently, quick. A soul in that state can be jolted, disoriented, and rather than rising into higher dimensions, it might cling to the remnants of the body or to the location where the fire occurred. That's not ascension, that's spiritual chaos. In ancient China, fire was used in ceremonies only after the proper alignment of energies was confirmed. The timing, the intention, the participants, all had to be right. Because they knew that fire responds to frequency. If the fire is lit in a low vibrational state, 99, with grief, haste, or indifference, the flames absorb and transmit that energy. They don't just consume the body, they imprint the soul with the surrounding vibration. That's why sacred fire was always surrounded by chanting, by sacred geometry, by focused attention, because the frequency of the moment shaped the direction the soul would travel. This truth was never meant to be forgotten, but we've replaced it with convenience. We've told ourselves that the fire will do the work for us, that it will cleanse, erase, release. But fire doesn't erase karma. It doesn't substitute for consciousness. It merely accelerates whatever is already in motion. If the soul is confused, it accelerates confusion. If the soul is still processing grief, it amplifies the grief. If the soul is prepared, centered, and aligned, then yes, fire becomes a vehicle of ascension. But that preparation doesn't happen automatically. It happens through intention, through presence, through ceremony. The body must be honored, the space must be protected, the soul must be acknowledged. Otherwise, you're not initiating a transformation. You're lighting a match to something still in process. Fire used in sacred rites was always symbolic of the great dissolving, the return of form to formlessness. But even that return required guidance. In many indigenous traditions, fire was never used at all until the elders received signs from the spirit world, not dreams, messages, omens that the soul had departed completely. The fire wasn't the first step. It was the final act. And only when it could be done with clarity, because fire is fast, instantaneous. It doesn't wait for you to be ready. Once it's lit, the process begins. And if you're not spiritually prepared, if the soul is still hovering in confusion, that speed becomes violence. The transformation becomes a tearing, and the soul might carry that trauma into the next phase of its journey. That's why, in some traditions, burial was preferred, not because it was better, but because it was slower, gentler. It allowed the soul time to fully detach, to witness the final rites from a distance, to say goodbye without the jarring rupture of combustion. It wasn't about superstition, it was about timing, and timing is everything when dealing with fire. So ask yourself, what is the state of energy in the room when someone is cremated today? Are there prayers? Are there rituals? Is the fire blessed, protected, invoked with divine intention? Or is it just another body in line, pushed into a chamber, ignited, reduced to ash, and swept away? We wouldn't treat a wedding or a birth this way. But we treat death, arguably the most spiritually significant moment of all, with clinical indifference. And then we wonder why the energy feels heavy, why something feels incomplete, why some souls don't seem to move on. It's not because they're weak, it's because we've forgotten how to light the fire properly. Fire is sacred, but sacred doesn't mean safe. Sacred means powerful, and power, when mishandled, can harm as much as it heals. That's why in every mystery school, fire was taught last. After water, earth, and air, fire came only when the initiate was ready to handle its intensity. It was not for the unprepared, and certainly not for the unconscious. When you cremate a body without spiritual preparation, you're not just burning flesh, you're altering the energy field that surrounds a soul. You're sending a signal to the subtle realms, and what that signal says depends entirely on how the fire is lit. Let that truth sink in, because the next time you see fire, whether in a candle or a funeral pyre, you'll know, it's not just a flame, it's a portal, and it responds not to your convenience, but to your consciousness. You've heard the stories. the whispers of cold spots in empty rooms, lights flickering without cause, shadows moving just beyond your line of sight. Sometimes it's dismissed as imagination, sometimes as coincidence, but deep down, part of you knows there's more to it. These aren't just ghost stories, they're symptoms, echoes of something real. And what if I told you that many of these disturbances are not only real, but often connected to one overlooked truth, the interruption of the soul's transition after death? In the stillness that follows someone's final breath, something fragile is unfolding. The body has stopped, but the soul hasn't finished. It's still integrating, it's still detaching. And if that process is cut short, if the body is destroyed too soon, or without sacred intent, the soul can be disrupted. In some cases, it becomes lost, confused, fragmented, and that's where things get strange. Throughout history, cultures across the world have warned about this, not in sensational terms, but as part of their spiritual reality. In Eastern Europe, they spoke of spirits unable to find peace, hovering near the sites of their death. In parts of Asia, certain families would delay cremation for days, even weeks, because they feared anchoring the soul to this world through premature burning. In tribal Africa, elders told stories of ancestors whose spirits roamed until proper rites were performed. And even in the modern world, psychics, energy workers, and spiritual practitioners have encountered a common thread: someone's transition was incomplete. When cremation is done too soon, especially without spiritual preparation, the body becomes a kind of energetic bomb. The soul, still hovering, still adjusting, is suddenly torn from its final connection, and in that shock, it can become trapped, not physically, but energetically. It doesn't move on because it's still processing what just happened. That confusion can create loops, residual imprints, a kind of energetic haunting that plays on repeat, not always because the spirit is angry or malevolent, but because it's stuck. You may have felt it. Walked into a room and sensed something off. A heaviness, a presence, a feeling like someone else was there. It's not always imagination. Sometimes it's the residue of a soul that wasn't given time to leave fully. Sometimes it's a fragment, a part of the person's consciousness still anchored to the material world because the proper rites weren't honored. And sometimes it's more than that. It's an entire soul, wandering, unsure of what happened, still trying to understand why its body was set aflame before the journey was complete. In places where cremations are rushed or done without awareness, these disturbances are more common than people realize. Hospitals, funeral homes, and even private homes where someone passed can retain these imprints. Psychic mediums often describe encounters with confused spirits, those who don't know they've died, or who can't accept it because everything happened too fast. They weren't honored, they weren't guided, and their last connection to this world was severed in fire. There's a reason why certain spiritual practitioners won't enter crematoriums or will perform cleansing rituals afterward. They know what lingers. Not just the emotional grief of those left behind, but the energetic residue of those who were burned too soon. And if no one clears it, it remains. These places hold echoes, some subtle, some intense, all of them real. But it's not just about locations. It's about lineage. Families who have cremated loved ones without spiritual awareness sometimes find themselves haunted, not by ghosts in the traditional sense, but by patterns, emotional unrest, recurring dreams, feelings of unease or guilt that don't seem to have a clear origin. This can be the energetic echo of a trapped soul trying to communicate, not to scare, but to be acknowledged, to be released. There are cases where these energies manifest as what people call hauntings, apparitions, sudden temperature changes, disembodied voices, but more often, it's quieter. It's the sense that something's not settled, that something was left incomplete, and in many of these cases, the common thread is cremation without ceremony, without timing, without care. Spiritual fragmentation is also real. When the soul is interrupted during its detachment, parts of it can scatter. Some fragments stay tethered to places, others to people, others to memories. These fragments can influence those still living, especially those closest to the deceased. They can create confusion, emotional overwhelm, and even a sense of carrying someone else's burden. It doesn't mean the soul is malicious, it means the soul is incomplete, and the living are feeling its pain. You don't have to believe in ghosts to understand this. Think of it as energetic trauma. When you injure your body, the trauma lingers. It needs time to heal. The same is true for the soul. If its transition is injured, especially by violent cremation done too quickly, that trauma lingers. It affects what comes next, and without intervention, it can persist across lifetimes. But here's what the ancient teachers knew. Trapped energy can be released, wandering souls can be guided, fragmented pieces can be called home. The key is awareness, intention, acknowledgement. In many cultures, rituals are performed weeks, even months after death, to help the soul if it got lost. These aren't just for comfort, they're tools. They open energetic doorways, they invite completion. This is why it's so important to understand what cremation really does. When approached with sacred timing, intention, and spiritual support, it can assist in the soul's release. But when rushed, when done without reverence, it risks tearing open something that needs to be gently unwrapped. It risks creating confusion where there could have been peace. And it risks anchoring that confusion to earth, where others will feel it, even if they can't name it. You've likely already crossed paths with one of these stories: a friend's home that always felt off, a hotel room where no one slept well, a feeling you couldn't shake after attending a cremation. These are not random, they are signatures, and once you know how to read them, you start to see the pattern. This knowledge isn't meant to frighten you, it's meant to awaken you, to help you remember what death really is, a sacred unfolding that requires care. The soul is not a switch to be flipped off, it is an ancient traveler, and how you treat its vessel determines how it leaves. If you or someone you love has already gone through a cremation without this awareness, all is not lost. Energy can still be cleared, the soul can still be acknowledged. You can still hold vigil, light candles, speak to them, ask them to release, and they will hear you, because the soul, even when delayed, always seeks completion. The real danger is in ignoring this, in pretending that death is just an event and not a transition. But you know better now. You feel it, in your body, in your bones. The soul deserves more than fire. It deserves reverence, guidance, and a peaceful release, because when we honor the unseen, we restore the balance. And when we restore the balance, the wandering ends. Karma isn't punishment, it's resonance, a rhythm, a mirror. Every thought, word, and action you've ever expressed leaves an energetic impression, and that impression doesn't disappear when the body dies. Instead, it follows the soul into the next phase, like an echo still bouncing through the corridors of consciousness. Karma isn't waiting to get you after death, it's simply the unfinished energy still attached to your field. And how you die, more importantly, how your body is treated after death, can have a profound impact on how that karmic energy resolves or doesn't. The moment of death is not an ending but a culmination. A soul doesn't just exit a body and float away detached. It processes, it observes, it reviews the life it lived. And part of that review includes the state of energetic release. Did you leave peacefully? Was your body honored? Was your final moment one of reverence or of rupture? These things matter. Because karma responds not just to what you do in life, but also to how you leave it behind. When a body is cremated without spiritual intention or preparation, something unnatural happens. The body, which holds years, sometimes lifetimes, of emotional and karmic residue, is suddenly annihilated, not transitioned, not slowly returned to the earth, annihilated. The energy still lingering in the tissues, in the bones, in the breath that only just left, is forcefully dispersed. It's a violent dissolution, even if it's dressed in sterile modernity, and that abrupt disintegration can scatter the karmic threads rather than resolve them. It's like ending a movie before the final scene. The storyline doesn't conclude. The energy that was supposed to come full circle gets fragmented, suspended, and when that happens, the soul doesn't integrate the lessons it came to learn. Instead, it carries an incomplete pattern into the next life. That's how karmic loops are formed. The same themes, the same emotional wounds, the same types of relationships, repeated over and over, life after life, because the story was never fully closed. Now imagine that this karmic echo isn't just internal, it extends into the space around the soul. If the body is destroyed in haste, the energetic imprint of that destruction lingers. That trauma, even if it wasn't felt consciously, becomes part of the soul's narrative. And trauma doesn't just go away, it vibrates, it shapes perception, it creates distortions. The soul begins its next incarnation not from clarity, but from confusion. It enters the womb already tangled in threads that should have been dissolved. This is why the death rites of ancient cultures were so deliberate. They weren't just honoring the dead, they were closing karmic circuits, helping the soul return to source with a clear record, a balanced field, and an open path forward. The rituals, the prayers, the pacing, all of it was designed to soothe the soul's exit and allow the body to release its karma gently, like exhaling the final breath of a long and difficult life. But when cremation happens too soon, too violently, or without spiritual care, it disrupts that breath. The soul may leave confused, it may not even realize the body is gone. And that confusion turns into attachment. The soul lingers, it clings to what's left, not because it's weak or unawakened, but because the departure was never completed, it was interrupted. And that interruption doesn't only affect the one who died, it ripples. It touches the family, the home, the lineage. The energetic echo of an unsettled departure can haunt a space for generations. Not in the Hollywood sense, but in the energetic sense. 9. A heaviness, a sense of unease, recurring patterns of grief or misfortune. The karmic debris that wasn't transmuted by ritual now spills into the lives of the living. Because energy doesn't disappear, it transfers. This is why some spiritual teachings emphasize ancestral healing so strongly, because the unresolved karma of the dead becomes the burden of the living. And, in cases where cremation was rushed or performed without sacred awareness, that karma can be amplified. The fire that was meant to release becomes a force of fragmentation, and the family, unaware of the deeper spiritual laws, is left wondering why things don't feel quite right. It all comes back to consciousness. Fire is not the issue. Cremation itself is not inherently wrong, but the way it's done, the vibration behind it, the presence or absence of spiritual intention, that's what determines its karmic weight. If fire is used with prayer, with reverence, with attunement to the soul's state, it can indeed be a portal of liberation. But if it's used like a switch to handle the body quickly and quietly, it becomes a karmic accelerant. It doesn't resolve the past, it burns the evidence and leaves the soul to wander through the smoke. And here's the deeper layer. Karma is not bound by time. A mistake made in the hour of death can echo across lifetimes. The soul may incarnate again with a deep fear of fire, or an unexplainable dread of being burned, or a vague resistance to letting go. These aren't irrational phobias, they're imprints, echoes, remnants of a transition that went wrong. But just as karma can echo forward, it can also be healed. Nothing is permanent. If cremation was done without awareness, the soul can still be soothed. Rituals can be performed even years later. Prayers can be spoken, sacred space can be created, intention can be reset, and the karmic energy, though scattered, can begin to weave itself back into harmony. Because karma is not a sentence, it's a dance, and at any point, you can choose to move differently. If you are someone who lost a loved one through cremation, don't carry guilt, but do carry awareness. Light a candle in their name, speak to them, ask their soul to complete what was left unfinished. Your love and intention can reach across realms. It's never too late to bring peace. And if you're planning your own transition one day, consider this. Your body is not just yours. It's your story, your bridge, the vessel of your karmic evolution. Let it be honored. Let your exit be sacred. Let the fire, if used, be a sacred flame, not a mechanical process. Because the final moments matter. Not just for you, but but for everything you're connected to. And if you exit this world in peace, in presence, in spiritual awareness, you don't just escape karma, you rewrite it, you liberate others, you close the loops, you become free. In today's world, death has become a transaction, a service, a checklist, and what used to be a sacred transition of the soul is now a line item on an invoice. You don't plan a spiritual release anymore. You schedule a cremation slot. You don't gather to commune with the soul. You hire a package deal. Somewhere along the way, the mystery of death was hijacked by the machinery of business, and the cost isn't just monetary, it's spiritual. You probably think cremation is just a practical option, that it's simpler, cheaper, and somehow more modern. That's exactly what you've been told. But stop and ask yourself, who benefits from that belief? Who decided cremation should become the default? Why is the industry so eager to push it as the easiest solution? The truth is unsettling. Behind the quiet funeral homes and polished brochures lies a multi-billion-dollar industry built not on spiritual wisdom, but on convenience and control. And the soul, your soul, has become collateral in the process. Most people don't realize that modern funeral practices are not designed with the soul in mind. They're designed for speed, profit, and liability. Cremation is cheaper. It takes less space. It's quicker to schedule. There's no long-term storage, no burial plots, no maintenance. And for the industry, it's clean and efficient. You show up, sign the documents, pay the fee, and the body is gone in hours. But spiritually, what just happened? You were never told to wait. You were never told the soul might still be present. You were never told the body still holds energy that needs time to dissolve. You were told it's just a shell. That once the heart stops, there's nothing left to honor. But that isn't wisdom, that's marketing. A narrative built to turn the sacred into the streamlined. And here's the real problem. Cremation has been normalized, not because it's right, but because it's profitable. Over time, the language shifted. Words like final disposition replaced sacred terms. Death care became logistics. The sacred window after death was turned into a scheduling issue. The funeral industry began selling cremation as a modern choice, dressing it up as environmentally conscious, cost-effective, and even liberating. But liberation of what? The soul, or the balance sheet? Most people don't know what actually happens in a cremation chamber. The body isn't gently returned to the elements. It's exposed to extreme heat, rapidly reduced to ash in a furnace-like process that few ever witness. It is clinical, industrial, and all of it happens before the soul has had time to fully separate. In many cases, cremations are scheduled within 24 hours. The body is moved, handled, and incinerated without pause, without spiritual intention, without allowing the energy to complete its transition. And all of this is done with the full confidence of the industry, because most people don't ask questions. They trust the process. They believe what they're told, that the soul is gone, that the body doesn't matter, that cremation is just easier. But easier for whom? The spirit or the schedule? This illusion of convenience is dangerous, because it bypasses one of the most sacred thresholds in human existence. The soul needs time, time to review, time to detach, time to begin its journey back to source. But when the body is burned without spiritual care, without delay, without intention, the process is fractured. And that fracture doesn't just disappear, it leaves an imprint on the soul, on the space, on the people left behind. The funeral industry doesn't talk about that. It doesn't explain that ancient cultures waited 3 days for a reason, that chanting, prayer, and stillness weren't optional, they were necessary. Because those traditions were built on soul science. Today, death is run like a business. You're sold a cremation plan like you're booking a hotel room. Package A, B, or C. No spiritual education, no guidance, just signatures. Even green cremation or eco-friendly options are still missing the point. It's not about what happens to the ashes, it's about what happens to the energy. Cremation, done without awareness, is not neutral. It has consequences, not because fire is bad, but because fire is powerful. And when you use it without preparation, without reverence, you disrupt something that cannot be undone. Spiritual sovereignty means having the right to leave this world with dignity, with ceremony, with consciousness. But that right is quietly stripped when cremation is sold as the default. Most people never knew they had another choice. They didn't know that delaying cremation by a few days could allow the soul to transition peacefully. They didn't know that spiritual rituals could guide the energy home. They didn't know because no one told them. And no one told them because there's no profit in waiting. There's no financial incentive to educate you about the 72-hour soul window. No business gain in telling families to hold sacred space. That doesn't sell. But what does sell is speed. Simplicity. Packages that include everything, so you don't have to think. But thinking is exactly what this moment requires. Presence, intention, soul-level attention, not automation. You might think, it's too late. My loved one has already been cremated. But it's never too late for reverence. You can still hold vigil. You can still light candles. You can still speak to their spirit, ask for peace, offer love. You can still claim the spiritual space that was denied in the rush of industry. And, for yourself, you can choose differently. You can make a plan that honors your soul. You can speak to your family about what you want, not what's easy, but what's true. The business of death has masked itself in professionalism, but underneath, it's missing the most vital element of all, the soul. You are not a case file. You are not a logistical task. You are a divine being, and the way you leave this life matters. It matters more than most people will ever know. Convenience is not the same as care, and speed is not the same as sacredness. When you understand that, you begin to see through the illusion. You begin to take back your spiritual power. And you begin to remember that death is not something to be handled, it's something to be honored. Because the moment of death isn't just about what happens to the body, it's about what happens to you. And when that moment comes, it deserves more than a transaction. It deserves truth, ceremony, and a return to the sacred. So, if cremation done without awareness can fragment the soul's transition, what can be done instead? What choices are available that actually support the soul in crossing peacefully? The answer isn't found in a one-size-fits-all ritual, but in the energy behind the action, in the intention, the timing, and the sacred care offered in those final moments. Across ancient civilizations, the death process was never rushed, never sterile, and never viewed as a medical event. It was a spiritual passage, and those who guided it were not morticians, but mystics. The first thing to remember is that death is not a void, it is a doorway. And just like birth, the passage must be softened, supported, and spiritually held. When someone dies, their body may be still, but their presence remains. The room is thick with their essence, their frequency still suspended in the space like mist over a lake. This is not the time to evacuate emotion or call the coroner, it is the time to slow everything down. In many indigenous cultures, the body is not touched for several hours after death. Loved ones are encouraged to sit in silence, to breathe deeply, and to allow the soul to orient itself. This moment, this sacred window, is delicate. The soul is adjusting, looking back, listening, and what it needs most is peace. No machines, no harsh lights, just stillness, intention, and presence. One of the most powerful things you can do in this space is anoint the body, not as a ritual of cosmetics, but as a transfer of love. Oils like sandalwood, myrrh, frankincense, or even simple olive oil can be warmed and gently rubbed into the feet, the chest, the forehead. This isn't for preservation, it's for energetics. The oil carries intention, the touch carries memory, and as you anoint the body, you help seal the energetic field. You let the soul know that this vessel is being honored, not discarded. Breath rituals can also be performed, not for the one who has passed, but for those still present. Conscious breathing, slow, circular, heart-centered, creates a wave of calm that envelops the room. This breath anchors the frequency of love, which becomes the platform from which the soul departs. In some cultures, a sacred chant or tone is repeated softly, a vibration that helps the soul lift. Sound becomes a bridge, a tuning fork that aligns the soul with higher realms. If possible, keep the body at home for a day or two. let loved ones visit, let stories be told, let laughter and tears share the space together. This isn't morbid, it's medicine. It teaches the living that death is not exile, it's transformation, and it allows the soul to complete its witnessing, to hear the love, to absorb the gratitude, to finish the journey with wholeness. When the time comes to move the body, choose burial if your culture allows, not because burial is better, but because it allows the process of physical return to unfold naturally. The body, still charged with energy, returns to the earth in rhythm, not rupture. It decomposes with the support of the elements, earth, water, time, too, and this gentle descent sends a signal to the soul. It is safe to rise. If cremation must be chosen, elevate it into ritual. Don't let it be a factory procedure. Bring presence. Light sacred fire beforehand. Speak to the soul. Ask it to ascend. Prepare the space. Play mantras. Offer prayers. Wait at least 3 days if possible. Treat the fire as a gatekeeper, not a garbage chute. Ask it to carry the soul, not tear it away. And don't underestimate the power of words. Speak to the one who has passed, even if it's days later. Tell them they are loved, that they are free, that their body was not who they were. Words shape energy. They give the soul orientation. They help it know that it is not lost, not alone, not broken. One powerful ancient practice involves the lighting of a candle for 49 days after death, i.e., a symbolic flame representing the soul's journey through the in-between. Each day, a few moments are taken to focus on love, forgiveness, and release. The flame acts as a spiritual companion, illuminating the soul's path home. This practice is found in multiple traditions, each with its own version, and it all comes down to consistency, reverence, and light. There are also elevation ceremonies, rituals designed to lift the soul if it feels heavy or stuck. These involve a combination of prayer, smoke, sacred herbs, drumming, or water rituals, depending on the culture. The purpose isn't to force anything, it's to invite, to remind the soul that it is more than its story, more than its pain, more than the way it died. These ceremonies can be done days, months, even years after death. Because energy has no expiration, even sacred geometry can assist. Laying the body in alignment with natural forces, head pointing east, for instance, can help the soul orient to the direction of light. Crystals placed on specific chakras, symbols drawn around the space, or the burning of specific woods like Palo Santo or cedar can all help cleanse the environment and create a corridor of ascension. And perhaps most importantly, give the soul permission to go. It may seem unnecessary, but many souls linger because they sense unfinished business or feel responsible for those left behind. Whisper to them, "You did enough. It's time now. Be free." Those words carry tremendous power. The soul hears with the heart, not with ears. It understands vibration, and when that vibration is loving, clear, and spacious, it rises. These practices aren't about superstition or performance. They are about frequency. You are creating an energetic climate in which the soul can complete its journey. Like midwives guiding a baby into the world, you become a soul doula, guiding the spirit out of the body and into the next realm. Your presence is the bridge. Your love is the vehicle. Death, when honored properly, becomes a mirror. It reflects how deeply we've remembered who we are. It shows us whether we see the body as trash or as temple, and it reveals whether we treat the soul as a fleeting spark or as eternal light. You don't have to be a monk or mystic to guide a soul well. You only need to be present, open-hearted, and reverent. Light a candle, say a prayer, wash the feet, hold the space, trust that the soul knows what to do, but help it get there in peace. Because when death is treated as sacred, life begins to feel sacred too. Maybe you're reading this with a heavy heart. Maybe someone you loved was cremated before you knew what it truly meant. Maybe you already made those arrangements for yourself, thinking it was the right thing, the simplest thing, the respectful thing. And now, a quiet voice inside you is asking, "Did I make a mistake?" If that's you, take a breath. You need to hear this. The soul is never trapped by a single choice when intention enters the space. You are not bound by what you didn't know. You are not punished for doing what you thought was best. The universe doesn't work through guilt. It moves through awareness, through intention, through remembrance. Yes, cremation done without spiritual understanding can create disruptions, but the soul is not powerless. It is not a victim. It is resilient. And more importantly, it listens. The most important thing you can do now is simple. Bring consciousness to where there was once only routine. What was missing in the moment of death, reverence, prayer, awareness, reverence, can still be brought forth now. Energy moves beyond time. Intention transcends space. Even if the body was reduced to ash, even if the soul was disrupted, you can call it into peace. You can restore the energetic connection. You can help guide what was never properly released. Start with this truth. The soul hears you. Whether it was your mother, your partner, your child, or your dearest friend, their soul still exists in a realm that is far more reachable than you think. And what you say now, what you feel now, ripples into that realm. Speak to them, out loud, in a whisper, in your thoughts. Tell them what you didn't know. Tell them you didn't mean to rush their departure. Tell them you honor them now, in full awareness, in full love. That vibration will reach them. That energy will offer the very clarity and release they may not have received at the time. You don't need a grand ritual, but you do need sincerity. Create a sacred moment, wherever you are. Light a candle, play music that resonates with their spirit. Sit in silence and invite them into the space. Not to pull them back, but to honor the continuation of their journey. You can say, I release you fully now. I hold you in love. I trust your soul to find peace and return to the light. And if there was confusion, if their energy felt stuck, this simple act can open the path. You may even feel something shift, a heaviness lifting, a quiet sense of resolution, a warmth in your chest. That's how you'll know, not always in fireworks but in softness, in stillness, in the echo of peace where there was once only regret. And if you made the choice for yourself, if you've written it in your will or prepaid for cremation thinking it was the right thing, now is the time to revisit that plan with new eyes. It's not too late. You can change your mind. You can update your request. You can write a new letter to your family that explains what you've learned, what you now feel, and what you truly want your departure to look like. If cremation still feels right to you, then choose it with intention. Include spiritual instructions. Ask that your body be left untouched for at least 72 hours. Ask for prayers, for music, for stillness. Let your loved ones know that you are not just being disposed of, you are transitioning, and you want your soul to be supported as it travels. Intention changes everything. A cremation done with awareness, done with timing, done with reverence, is not the same as one done in haste. Fire can liberate, when used with care. And if your plan includes that kind of sacred support, your soul will feel it. It will ride that wave of intention into the next realm with grace, not confusion. Remember, the soul is infinitely intelligent. It adapts, it heals. Even if trauma occurred at the moment of death, healing can happen after. Whether it's you or someone you love, the journey continues. And consciousness, too, heartfelt awareness, too hard to devise, can find its way back into the story at any point. If you cremated someone without knowing, you are not to blame. You acted with love. You acted with trust. That matters. But now that you know more, you can return to that soul with new energy. You can hold space for their transition again. You can light a fire that doesn't burn but guides. A fire in your heart that speaks to them across dimensions, saying, I remember you. I see you. I release you fully now. There are other things you can do too. Create a small altar in their honor. Place a photo, a candle, a few natural elements like water or flowers. Speak to their soul from time to time. Not to anchor them here, but to acknowledge their journey. That kind of sacred remembrance sends a message across realms. You are loved. You are free. You are whole. You can also ask for forgiveness, not because you're guilty, but because it clears the field. Sit quietly and say, if any part of you was disturbed by how things unfolded, I ask for your forgiveness. may we both be released now into peace. This isn't just symbolic, it's vibrational. It opens space. It untangles the threads. And if you're carrying guilt, let it go. That guilt is not yours to hold. It serves no one. It doesn't help the departed. It doesn't serve your own growth. The soul doesn't hold it against you. What the soul wants is your love, your intention, your presence. That's all. Not perfection, not ritual mastery, just truth, just heart. Consciousness heals everything. When it returns to the space where it was once missing, it transforms the entire narrative. It realigns timelines. It completes energetic loops. The soul doesn't need you to fix the past. It needs you to be present now. That's where the power is. You are not bound by one moment. You are not defined by one decision. What matters now is what you choose to embody moving forward. Let your next breath be sacred. Let your next choice be conscious. Let your remembrance be healing, not haunted. Because every soul wants peace, every soul wants release, and every soul, including yours, will find its way home, especially when it is met with light. There's a reason you're still watching. A reason this message found you now. Not a year ago, not when you were younger, but in this exact moment. Because whether you realize it or not, something inside you already knew. You felt it when you walked into a funeral home and sensed the sterility. You felt it when you heard the furnace roar behind closed doors. You felt it when someone you loved passed away, and the silence in the room didn't feel peaceful. No-ness, it felt unfinished. These aren't just feelings, they are spiritual alarms, and this is your wake-up call. We've been told to accept convenience over consciousness, to trade sacredness for speed, to reduce the most spiritually delicate moment of life, death, to an industry of efficiency. But that lie is unraveling. You can feel it, can't you? The tension between what's normal and what's true. The sense that something vital has been lost in translation. Death was never meant to be an event that happens behind closed doors, away from the eyes, behind sterile gloves and ticking clocks. Death was supposed to be a rite of passage, a ceremony, a return. And what happens in those moments, after the last breath, matters more than we were ever taught. The soul doesn't just exit, it pauses, it listens, it waits. It surveys the life it just left behind and takes with it the imprint of how it was received, how it was released, how it was remembered. If the transition is treated with love, the soul departs lighter. If it is rushed, confused, or met with mechanical coldness, that final vibration follows it, into the next realm, into the next body, into the next cycle. You've learned now what the ancients always knew, that the body is not just flesh, it is the last temple of the soul. That fire, while sacred, is also dangerous when used without reverence. That the first 72 hours after death are not a logistical window, but a spiritual one, a portal in which the soul orients itself and begins the sacred rise. And that the rituals, the prayers, the intention behind every action in those final days ripple across realms. This isn't about fear, it's about truth, because truth is what sets the soul free, and the truth is, the way we treat the dead is a reflection of how we understand life. If we see death as waste, we treat the body like garbage. If we see death as sacred, we honor the vessel with reverence. It's not just about what's done, it's about the energy behind it. And energy never lies. So now the question is this: what will you do with what you now know? Will you look away, pretend it's too heavy, too uncomfortable, too far off? Or will you choose to live with your eyes open, to take responsibility for your own exit, and to bring consciousness to those you love when their time comes? Because the truth is, you don't have to change the whole system to make a difference. You only have to change how you show up in the moment that matters most. You can choose to sit with the dying, to hold their hand, to whisper love into the space where their soul is listening. You can choose to wait before rushing to dispose of their body. You can create sacredness where none was offered before. You can reclaim the ancient knowledge that has lived in your bloodline all along. And when your time comes, not as lies, because it will, you can choose to leave this world not in haste, not in fear, not in confusion, but in clarity, in stillness, in light. You can instruct your loved ones to wait, to light candles, to anoint your body, to speak to your soul like it's still in the room, because it will be. You can ask for burial, or for sacred cremation done with full presence and spiritual care. You can make your exit a prayer. This isn't about controlling death, it's about guiding it, about remembering that the way we die shapes how we return, that karma isn't just built in life, it's released, or not, in death, and that you have the power to step out of the loop, to complete the cycle, to close the story cleanly. No one taught you this because no one profits from consciousness, but now you know, and that knowing can't be undone. The illusion has cracked, and through that crack, the light is spilling in. You don't need to be an expert, you don't need robes, incense, or sacred texts. You need love, stillness, reverence, a willingness to see death not as a problem to solve, but a mystery to honor. You need the courage to step into the space where the soul hovers and say, I see you, I love you, you are free, because the soul hears those words. It always has, and when it does, something ancient awakens. The confusion lifts, the fear dissolves, and the journey home begins. So let this be your vow, that you will never again allow a soul to leave this world unseen, unheard, or unhonored. That you will hold space for the sacred. That you will carry this knowledge not as fear, but as power. That you will stand at the edge of life with eyes wide open and a heart full of light. Choose consciousness over convenience. Choose sacredness over speed. Choose truth over tradition. Because the moment of death is not the end, it is the initiation. And you are the one who now holds the torch.